You like movies about gladiators?
Those men wanted to have sex with me.
Great Scott!
Nice beaver.
Cinderella boy.
Ramble is a pussy.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm Batman.
Sorry? Who are you?
I'm George McGee.
As you may have guessed, this month we are going to be covering the 1989 Tim Burton film Batman. On last month's episode, we covered The Goonies, a family classic, Richard Donner, Steven Spielberg, so we're going to a very different place now. It's the summer, there's comic book films everywhere, whether it's Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, or anything else that's being thrown at you. There's never been a better time for us to cover a comic book film. And that's why we've gone back to Batman, because at the time, I was 10 years old. George, you would have been
6.
Yes, so more impressionable than you can ever imagine. So it's no surprise that Batman is not only one of the most bankable franchises or assets that studios keep returning to, it's been a very big part of our lives. This may be a long episode.
I would think so. I've got a lot to say about it. I say I'm a big fan. It's one of the sort of first films that I watched repeatedly as a child. So I've got a lot to say about it.
So, as per usual, we're going to talk about, the production team that brought us this, what was required to make this a green light, to make this film actually happen, because there is a bit of backstory which George is going to go into some detail. We're going to talk briefly about our first memories of the film, what worked, what doesn't work, how it still holds up today, and obviously our usual feature of coulda, woulda, shoulda. But with it being Batman and with it being so much connected to this, whether it be the comics, the computer games that it spawned, the more recent films from Nolan, and the fact that they're still making films, that he is still a go-to, we're going to try and cover that towards the end. But I think without further ado, we're going to take a jump into the film, George.
Let's get into it.
What are we recording on this week, George? Have you still, was it the Philips Laserdisc? How did that sound in the end?
Very much like Batman, I'm currently surrounded by a bank of 80s TV screens. There's lots of knobs and dials, and one of them's going to be recording something, I hope.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's kick off the show.
Story, the love story, a woman in danger, a hero in black.
Where does he get those wonderful toys?
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Rated PG-13, now playing at a theater near you.
So George, I know that this film was directed by Tim Burton, but how was Batman 1989 made possible?
This film has quite an extensive pre-production, so you would think for Batman it was quite a sure thing. You know, looking at how long the character's been around since 1939. He's one of the most popular comic book characters. Obviously, we had a Batman film off the back of the 1966 series with Adam West.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Which is a very much, I wouldn't even say it's a guilty pleasure, it's just a pleasure to watch. But yeah, the actual idea of getting a live action proper film of Batman took a long time coming. So there used to be movie serials back in the 1940s, so like 15-minute serials. There was, the 1960s show. And it wasn't until 1979, there was a guy called Michael Uslan, and he was working at DC Comics, who own Batman, the comic book house that Batman sits under. And that also DC Comics have Wonder Woman and Superman as well. And his dream was to make a dark, authentic film version of Batman, much like how he was originally created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger in the late 30s, early 40s. So he bought the film rights because nobody wanted them. The guys at DC said he was a fool for doing it.
It's never going to work.
Never going to work. And he teamed up with an old film producer because he himself didn't have any background in film. And they went around all the various different studios trying to shop it, and nobody wanted to touch it, which is quite surprising considering this is a year after Donner's Superman.
I was going to ask you, I was going to try and throw off the hip question. So where are we in the Superman franchise? Have we thrown nuclear weapons into the sun yet?
No, that wasn't until the late 80s.
Well, no, but I mean, we're in 89, so where were we in the Superman?
Superman 4 was, I think, 87.
Right, so we had done and dusted.
But no, this is at the time that the rights were bought. This is 1979.
Oh, right,
so it's 10 years before it made it to screen, the rights were bought.
Wow.
So they didn't have much joy, but I don't know if it was because of the stigma attached to the TV show. It ranged, looking back, because it'd been 20 odd years or just. It
was iconic. Everyone assumed that it had to be camp and.
But I think it wasn't looked back with fond memories. The Adam West show.
Not in the 80s.
Not in the 80s. People looked back at it a bit with disdain, like, oh, not like the Zhao Pow and that sort of thing. So they ended up teaming up with some more experienced movie producers, two guys called Peter Guber and John Peters. They were behind films like Witches of Eastwick, Rain Man, and they were actually producers on Flashdance as well, executive producers on that, which links them to Simpson and Bruckheimer as well. So they were quite powerful producers, or quite successful producers in the 80s. It landed back with Warner Brothers, which did own, and still own, DC Comics. So it landed back with them, and then they started looking into it. Warner Brothers were obviously, now it had caught the attention of more experienced producers. They were keen to push for a more Superman-esque tone. Off the back of the success of Superman, they wanted it very family-friendly, very colourful, very by the numbers. And I think even Richard Donner was in the frame at one point. Also, it went through various directors throughout the 80s. So it went through Ivan Reitman, who directed Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And
what else did he do? Reitman's done a few things.
Ivan Reitman's mainly comedies.
Yeah.
Interestingly, there's conflicting tales, but when he was in the frame, it's rumoured that Bill Murray was in the frame to play Batman, and Eddie Murphy
was
as
going to be
Robin.
Robin. Yeah, I read that as well.
Which sounds too silly to be true. Joe Dante was also attached for a year. Joe Dante is the guy behind Gremlins, which was a Warner Brothers property. Finally, it was passed over to an up-and-coming team. So Tim Burton had at that stage had done Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and he had finished Beetlejuice, but it hadn't been released yet. And he was teamed up with a writer called Sam Hamm, no relation to my man crush John Hamm. But they were, both new talents at Warner's, and they started working together.
So is that why they brought Keaton with them? Well, maybe why Burton brought Keaton with them, because he was like, I've worked with this guy, he has a certain intensity. So, yeah, you're
exactly right. Burton was the man that pushed for Keaton, because they'd worked together. And it was all about that together they wanted to create this universe that was recognizable but timeless at the same time. There was no product placement. It was very noir influenced. I think that was the sort of the angle that Sam Hamm was going for. And Sam Hamm was always keen from the very first draft. He didn't want it to be a traditional origin story, but more interesting, it could be an origin about the villain.
Freak. Terrorizes. Wait till they get a load of me.
However, this was all hinging. They were doing all this pre-production work in, I think, 1988, 1987. But they didn't get the green light until Beetlejuice was a success, because then that's when Tim Burton was, okay, he's a bankable star. But it's interesting to think that Tim Burton was 29 when he was doing this.
What a young director that must have been.
Very young director.
But Spielberg was young as well when he first got going.
That's true. So yeah, we can't talk about this film without the casting controversy about Michael Keaton, which is quite amusing in this day and age when, everyone's got an opinion about something. The internet is full of hateful people ranting about casting decisions every day.
The trolls.
The little trolls with their keyboards. But this was in pre-internet days, but still thousands of people wrote into Warner Brothers and said, you've got to be joking. You cannot cast
Well, there was still rumour mills. There was still, you were reading Empire. There were magazines. There was newspapers. There was there was casting parties. There was production times.
But even a lot of the production team were against the casting of Keaton because he didn't. He was 5'10", didn't have a square jaw, didn't look like an action hero. But Burton's made a very good point. He said it was more about the Bruce Wayne character. He had to be convincing that you had to believe a guy was driven enough, nuts enough to dress up as a bat. And if you pick some leading Hollywood actor like Alec Baldwin, I think who was in the frame as well, there was a lot of Hollywood's leading men were in the frame. But Burton felt if you took a series like a leading man and tried to dress him up as Batman, people wouldn't take it seriously. But if he took someone that looked a little bit unhinged and a little bit weird, and to be fair to him, I think it pays off quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that's obviously glossed over because we and everybody else remember this film we're going to talk about in a moment for the villain. And what struck me this time is that the most recent viewing of this film, I couldn't get over how, obviously he's had a bit of a reconnaissance of his own, the Michael Keatonaissance, and whatever. But anyway, he got an Oscar for Birdman, didn't he?
Yeah, he lost out to Eddie Redmayne, I think.
But no, he's back on the scene. He's done that. He's obviously in both Birdman and in the recent Spider-Man film, showing that he's got the chops, and he's done the Founder. So he's shown he's got
Spotlight. He's mixing it up in terms of Oscar, serious, weighty stuff with. Yeah, he's got his pick of stuff, and he's also very good in The Other Guys with Will Ferrell.
Yeah,
as the police chief.
As the police chief. But the point I just wanted to make is just that he had it back then, and we probably glossed over it, and maybe we didn't see what Tim Burton saw, because one, we take it for granted because there was a certain overshadowing by another actor.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the other thing was that one of the reasons why he was picked is apparently for his expressive eyes. Apparently, Michael Keaton's, and it makes sense if you think when you're in the Batman cowl.
Yeah, you can't see anything but the eyes.
And I think Chris Evans has said the same thing recently about playing Captain America. It's very hard to emote with your face when you're hidden behind a mask and a helmet. Your face is covered.
And people are staring at your amazing pecs.
That's true, but Michael Keaton didn't have that problem. And very much like Donner's Superman, when you've got an unknown, well, Michael Keaton wasn't as unknown as Christopher Reeve was, but when you have a fairly lesser known character as your lead, you have to bolster your cast up with some better known talent. And so Jack Nicholson was always at the top of the list for playing the Joker, but there was some other very...
Didn't they try and push Robin Williams into it just to try and tip Jack over the edge?
Yeah. So there was the top list for the Joker was all Hollywood's leading
comedians of the time.
Yeah, comedians of the time. So but even just villainous actors as well. So you had Robin Williams was apparently approached and was ready to do it, and then they basically went to Jack Nicholson and said, well, Robin Williams is keen to do it if you're not going to do it, which pushed Jack into the role. But John Lithgow was very talked himself out of it. Recently he came out and said, he met with Tim Burton, and he'd just come out of a long theatre production and needed some time off. Tim Curry was up for it.
Oh, wow.
And Willem Dafoe, because obviously he just looks plain evil. So, Nicholson's casting brought that respectability and also reassured the studio that had fears about, well,
who's going to go and see this?
Yeah, it was the name. It brought that film, because Jack is, Hollywood royalty. He's a credible actor. He's very, versatile, whether it's, gritty drama or comedy. Nicholson is very good at what he does, and he was a big name, at the height of his powers in sort of the 80s.
And we get all of Nicholson in this. We see everything. We see cool Nicholson, we see the jokes, we see the dryness, we see...
Apparently, it's one of his favourite films.
It's one of my favourite films. I mean, obviously, I've watched his Oscar-worthy performance, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and more recently we've had The Departed, but there's a scene in The Departed, when he's... Sorry to go off tangent here, but when he's trying to spook and he's got the hand with the ring on, And
I haven't seen The Departed in a while.
Well, it's he pulls a cut off hand out of a freezer.
Oh, yeah.
And he takes the ring off because he wants to, and he's telling someone a story when he's doing it. And he's like, his hands and the way he's just gesticulating, it's just so much Jack Napier. And that's why I would argue that in all of his work, you know, in terms of it, we talk about range sometimes because we try to sound like intelligent people, but the range of Jack Nicholson that you see in this film, I don't think there's anything, there's nothing that he does in any other film that you don't see in this. Everything's on show. He puts so much into it, and he's such a professional. And
well, because he's quite brooding when he's Jack Napier.
Such a journey. An arc.
Character arc. But Jack Nicholson isn't a dumb cluck. He's a very smart man, and he approached the role in terms of he knew he was in demand, that he was top of the list. So he cut himself quite a deal in terms of his pay packet. And I can't remember the exact figure, but he took a percentage of the
merch
of the proceeds. So he knew that, he says in this, there's a great sort of respective on the special edition DVD, and Jack has some great anecdotes. He clearly loves talking about it, but he says he knew how big it was going to become. He knew it was going to be something, and that's why he asked for a percentage of the profits. And the number seems to vary, but I think as it was even back in the early noughties, he was still the highest paid actor for one film. I know Robert Downey Jr. is making silly amounts, as you call it, David Schwimmer money on Iron Man, but Jack was one of the first people. I know Alec Guinness did it, I think, on Star Wars as well.
But to single out, to have like so much confidence in the role, and to get it in the contract before pre-production. I
think he made about 50 or 60 million. He may still be getting profits from it now. It's scary to think, and it's hilarious because in this documentary, Peter Guber, one of the producers, goes, Jack made a lot of money. A lot. And then there's a bit of a pause. He goes, but deservedly so. he's obviously sort of, crying that the amount of money that he lost to Nicholson.
Love that Joker.
But Nicholson goes on to saying when he met with Tim Burton, how much faith he had in him. He goes, I knew, even though he was such a young guy, he was so assured and he was so particular about what he wanted. I knew he was going to do well. I knew it was going to be something good.
Well, for me, that is the real test of someone's mettle is when they're really successful. Is what do they do with that power? Like to put this in perspective. Jack was at his height. He had power to throw around, and you know what he did? He got totally behind this film, and he says, "I'm going to make this film. I'm going to make you a star. I'm going to make this a success because I am the number one actor."
Well,
but he's going to do that. But he was mature enough to say, I'm going to help you make this a success. And he was fully invested. Unlike someone like, say, Natalie Portman, who uses her power and she has someone who puts her shoes on. So, when you're really big, that's when you show your true self. And the way that Jack's showed himself is like, I'm going to make this film a classic, and I'm going to put myself in the center of it. Fair play.
Well, apparently they had to win him over. So Jack invited them over to his ranch, and he was like, let's go and ride some horses. And Tim Burton, being, the sort of goth recluse, like, I don't do horses, I don't ride. And the producers are like, today you fucking do, Tim. And so he got on the horse, and he won Jack over.
We're probably focusing more on production than we normally do, but when you start talking about this, we're talking about 10 years to make this film a reality.
And they finally decided, I don't know if it was a budget thing, to make the whole film in London. So at Pinewood Studios, so all of Gotham City is a built set. And at the time, it was the most expensive production in the UK, and it came in at what amount? What is it, Charlie?
About $35 million.
35 million. Burton says that being in London and being so physically far away from Hollywood and studio was a benefit for the production team, because
being in such a dark, damp city.
Because there was so much negativity about it that people were convinced it was going to be, because of Burton's back catalogue of Pee-wee and Beetlejuice and the casting of Michael Keaton,
be a comedy.
It was going to be a camp comedy like the Adam West that nobody wanted. So
Does that bring us neatly to the teaser?
Yes, it does. It does. So
I watched this the other day, and it shocked me watching a teaser without a soundtrack.
So yeah,
music.
The teaser trailer was cut together and to try and quell this negativity. One of the first examples of a teaser trailer, and
which is saying a lot because they are now a massive part of the business.
It's part and parcel. Now we have teasers for teaser trailers. It's 90 seconds of cut footage. There's no voiceover. There's
dodgy camera angles.
There might be some minimal music, but people went nuts for it. They were curious. This was the first example. I mean, people did this when Star Wars was released and The Phantom Menace was released, but people were paying money to go and see a film just to go and watch the Batman trailer. People were selling, apparently, according to one of the producers, people were selling copies of the trailer on VHS, a 90-second trailer on VHS for $25 at comic book conventions. So people were going nuts for it. So I remember seeing it. It was played in front of probably one of my first cinema outings, see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And I didn't know what was going on. Like, it looked so dark. There was like Batman that was joking. I was like, who's this other evil guy with the weird eyebrows? Oh no, that's Michael Keaton. But I thought he was another character. I didn't really get that he was the hero because, he doesn't look like your typically heroic person.
So you're telling me that people would pay good money to go and see a film of the time just to see the trailer and not stay and watch that film? Now, is that just because the Batman trailer was great, or because the film at the time was Police Academy 6, City Under Siege?
Well,
I checked the films that this happened with. How do you know? How do you know that they left just because they wanted to watch the trailer, or just because Police Academy was so bad?
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of the hype machine, as it got closer and closer to release, I think it became a phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon.
Well, there was the music, there was the
merchandise.
There was the merchandise, but also I knew before going to see it, for example, Dad told me about the car. He said that they've modeled this, that they've taken lights from a Honda, that they've put a jet engine in the back. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then when you watch it, and still now, to this day,
still impressive.
That scene, it does. And if you look at it now with keen eye, it does perform and look like, say, the thing I compare it to is like a Formula One car.
Well, that actually is a nice sort of segue, because I can't talk about this film. I need to give a sort of an honourable mention to the production team. The production designer, so the guy that created the Gotham cityscape with
all that brilliant artwork,
all the architecture. He designed the Batmobile. Was a guy called Anton Furst, and he was also the guy that he did the set design for Full Metal Jacket, which was also filmed in London. So he managed to turn London Docklands into Vietnam.
That is some achievement.
He's very much responsible for the look and feel of those early Batman films, and in an extent the animated series. Tragically, he killed himself just 2 years after Batman. So he was so influential on the film. But anyway, should we jump into first memories?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a lot. Yeah, I have to say, because George and I are keen followers of the Empire group on Facebook, and a lot of the question that comes up is about your first cinematic experience. And the 12A certification was...
There was no A.
Sorry, there was no A. The 12 certification was a big deal because it came out when I was like 11. So it was a big deal because we were used to watching 15s and 18s on film, on VHS, without our parents' knowledge or with their knowledge. But this was a big deal. This was one of the first 12s that I went, but it was one of those experiences. I'll never forget that. It was the Metro Centre in Gateshead.
The UCI.
The UCI, as it was back then. I remember everything about that night, and it's funny because there's so much of that in the Batman story itself, of him going to the theatre with his parents. It's like a fourth wall thing. It's like, I'll never forget going to the cinema with my dad to see Batman. It's like that Danny Elfman music.
I will never forget how envious I was, how much I hated you as a child.
I can imagine, but it was that you talk about first memories, but the VHS is what we watched again and again and again. And we should talk briefly about the trailers. I mean,
well, yeah. So
your first memories.
So my first memory, obviously, as I was younger, I was 6. I mentioned in our first podcast that Dad had actually bought a VHS copy on a business trip in America.
Oh, we were so excited. You told us about it.
Yeah, and it didn't work.
This was back in the day. We should explain that Batman had been out for 6 months, for months, shall we say?
Yeah, I think this would have been probably sort of around Christmas times. It came out in the summer, and Dad came back with an American VHS copy, and he knew how much of a diehard Batman fan I was. Sadly, it didn't work, so I had to wait till. Pretty sure it was
summer.
May the following year.
Yeah.
So May 1990, at a birthday party at our good friends from last month's episode, the Glendinnings.
They're going to get their own feature, aren't they?
They're going to start their own rival film podcast. And you know what's going to be better because they had a better collection. I remember watching it at a birthday party, probably James's birthday party, and I even remember the trailers. Well, we both remember the trailers. One of them being the amazingly titled, "I'm gonna get you, sucker."
Even if you can't say it, you've got to see it.
Which was one of the first Wayne's spoof parody films. So,
have you ever seen it?
Yeah, I thought we watched it together.
We probably have, but I have a feeling that we were in a state that I can't actually remember the main parts of it.
Yeah, "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker" is a blaxploitation spoof released obviously at the end of the 80s. But that was one. I think the other one was a sort of Cockney gangster, "Let 'Em Have It."
Yeah, it was Let 'Em Have It, and then there wasn't the January Man with Kevin Kline, but the fact that George and I can remember verbatim the trailers that were in
the slogans to the trailers.
Even the slogans to the trailers that came with the Batman VHS gives you some idea as to how many times we've watched this film.
Connected to that as well, I got given a making of book, so those really glossy books where you get all this concept art, the behind the scenes photos. And that was my first exposure to filmmaking, what goes on to making a film, which was eye-opening for me because I was just like, so you got this picture of Batman and the Joker. Who's this weirdo in the middle?
Who's the goth?
Yeah, who's the goth in the middle with long hair? And it's like, oh, he's the director. Okay.
What's a director?
And it's nuts, like you saying, like your memory, like certain things you remember. Like I always remember the head of casting is Marion Doherty. The Bob Ringwood was the costume designer, and those names are burned into my brain.
You could argue that book or this film is the reason why we're here today. The reason why you studied film. The reason why we're obsessed, and why you got much more into the interested in what makes a film, what goes into making a film.
And that's why I've been talking for so long. We haven't even got to talking about
Should we start talking about the film, George?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Where does one begin? Well, you've got
at the beginning.
Yeah, but I still to this day, I want to know how big is that bat sign that the camera runs around in the opening credits? I'm guessing room size. Because you'd have to have, unless it's a small camera, this was the 80s, late 80s,
what do you
90s.
think, with the
camera runs, so just for those of you who haven't watched it yet again, the opening credits start with you're going round and it's like...
It looks like dark tunnels.
Yeah, dark tunnels, you're not sure what it is, and then it zooms out and you've been on a micro camera on a little roller coaster around the bat sign. And they obviously must have constructed a pretty big bat sign and then run cameras around it, so...
Yeah, I mean, it was probably, in terms of like when model making, they probably are able to use, I think, like Star Wars, like the trench run, that's like 6 feet deep. So
it would have been something along those lines.
Yeah.
That they've done for Star Wars, that they've done, and they did that for Superman as well with Superman 2.
Oh, okay.
I saw a doc on that, and they were doing similar sort of the miniature sort of work. The music.
Well, that's it. Danny Elfman's score is so good. Danny Elfman becomes...
What's he done for us lately?
Well, that's it. Danny Elfman has become a bit of a parody of himself, but I think out of all of Tim Burton's films, he's scored every single Tim Burton film apart from 3 films. So.
And also that that long-running animated series.
Obviously, the man behind the Simpsons theme tune, Edward Scissorhands, lots of orchestral maneuvers. But I think he started off in an 80s pop band. But importantly, again, Tim Burton was a risk, Michael Keaton was a risk. This was Danny Elfman's first big score. I think he had done Beetlejuice. Yeah. But again, Beetlejuice was an unknown quantity. So he had to prove his worth. When Tim Burton was trying to sell him into the producers, Danny Elfman was saying, I was just playing them little bits, little melodies I've been working on. And I could see the producers just were not interested in the slightest. They were just completely switched off.
I'm thinking of like Vince from the Mighty Boosh here.
Okay, well, what about this? What about this? And Tim Burton goes, play the march. And he does the dun, 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 dun. And the producer just, like you said, the producer literally just got up and just started dancing. I was like, yes, that's it. That's it.
And like, put down the Coke.
That's amazing. This score, this film is a key part of what makes it so iconic, what makes it so operatic on a scale.
It's what stores it in our memory. We know what's coming.
Well, I remember Dad had it on tape in his car. Yeah. He's like, I've got the Batman soundtrack. Prince? No, the other one. But yeah, it's a great, bold opening. It's really dark, it's dramatic, and as Tim Burton says, it completely banishes any thoughts of 60s camp within, in the first couple of minutes.
Should we talk briefly about Prince? Because you make a valid point that it kind of dates the film, and there is the terrible bat dance sort of thing. But the track that I love is from the museum scene, the Party Man.
That is a great song.
Which is a good, funky track.
But that's it. I'm a big Prince fan, but I think there's a lot of people that are Prince fans out there where, and obviously when he passed last year, we're gutted, but I don't think anyone really looks back on the Batman soundtrack as an awesome Prince album.
No, I'd say that, and what I said before, it's because the bat dance was so bad. Yeah. Whereas, and then there's the one at the end when they're on which we'll get
Trust.
to. Yeah, the Trust, which is not as good, but the Party Man track is a very good...
It works very well in the film.
But also, now I played it recently. I was like looking, because I'm going through a bit of an 80s disco funk phase, because we're all things retro. We take things very retro.
That's true.
And I like that track. It's obviously the only line in it is the black and white, red and green, where it's linked with the Joker. But it's a good track. Whereas I think it gets a bad rap because of the Bat Dance song, which I haven't even listened to for ages, but I just remember
it's a bit like Jive Bunny, sort of
commercially terrible.
Yeah. And the film then opens up this operatic, score, opens Gotham City, as you say, an impressive matte painting, shows the cityscape, and you have Prince playing on the radio.
Lots of taxis. Gotham looks okay to me, George. Prince is playing, taxis are everywhere. It doesn't look as run down as you might imagine.
It's a great opening because you see a mum and dad and a small boy wandering around Gotham City, lost, going down back streets.
What's going to happen?
And you immediately are fooled into thinking this is the origin of Batman. This is how Bruce Wayne becomes an orphan. But it's not. It's not. It's a nice, completely wrong foot to you, and it's a great introduction into Batman because you've got the two crooks on the roof.
Because you're left with that scene saying, but why didn't Batman save the couple?
Yeah.
How did those crims get away with those lovely innocent people's purses? And then a great entrance. A fantastic entrance.
Well, that's it. It's all about the way he sort of glides in, the silhouette of the wings.
You don't see that he's coming down on a call. It looks like he's flying it.
Yeah. And it's brilliant. And as you say, I remember
lots of smoke.
The sound effects of his foot crunching underneath and stuff like that. And you have the iconic, who are you?
I'm Batman. I'm Batman. I'm Batman. But he kind of whispers it in comparison to the more recent films where it's a growly.
Well, again, it's worth pointing out that Michael Keaton was the first person to do Batman voice because Adam West talked the same whether he was Bruce Wayne or
Batman. Yes, Mr. Wayne. Have you heard Mr. Freeze's scurrilous demands? Just briefly. If Robin and I act as go-betweens, are you prepared to make the telecast at midnight and pay the ransom, Mr. Wayne? I have no choice, Batman. Then may I suggest you tape the broadcast from the commissioner's office an hour earlier?
Hello. Batman speaking. So Michael Keaton was the first person to say, well, there's got to be that change in identity, because otherwise people are going to go, hang on, you sound a lot like...
It is hilarious because nobody else sounds like Adam West apart from Adam West. And when you meet him, you're like, that guy's crazy. So like, if you then meet Batman later in the day, you're like, wait a minute, you're that crazy billionaire freak I met earlier.
I don't know who you could be talking about, old chum. So... got that strong opening, and then very quickly sums up. It goes around.
We talked about this. The introduction is brilliant.
All the characters you've got. Harvey Dent, played by Billy D. Williams, who was a very smart man. He knew his Batman Batlaw, I should say.
Batlaw, let's call it.
Yeah, and he was
Bat Story.
Bat Story, even better. We'll go with that. And he was aware that Harvey Dent eventually became Two-Face, so he put a clause in his contract saying, I need to play Two-Face in a Batman sequel. Sadly, he was bought out for Batman Forever, and they brought in the much more hammy Tommy Lee Jones. So that's why Harvey Dent goes from a black guy with a mustache to Tommy Lee Jones and Batman Forever. But don't worry about that. You've got, Commissioner Gordon, you've got the mayor.
I don't care how deeply in debt this festival is. I want a parade. I want hot dogs, balloons, the whole schmear.
I want the whole schmear. You've got Jack Nicholson, Jack Palance.
Can I talk briefly? I wanted to raise...
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
There isn't time. What I wanted to say about the introduction of Jack, even going to throw this out there, is what's your favourite thing that you've seen an actor do in a film that they've obviously had to learn for the role? The card tricks.
Where he's chucking it around.
But there's other stuff in films that you see that you can't do, but you know that the actors have obviously... Maybe it's an Empire discussion.
Completely going off topic, but I'm currently reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography at the moment.
It's his birthday today, by the way. Happy birthday, Arnold.
Or it was recently, I think, maybe yesterday.
George, we're recording it on his birthday. Why don't you just shut the hell up?
Happy birthday, big guy. But I'm reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography.
Again?
It's very big. Amazingly titled Total Recall.
How does he come up with it?
But he goes into detail of how he links everything back to like being a bodybuilder, how many reps you have to do, but how much training you had to do for flipping the shotgun for Terminator 2. Which I should really save this anecdote for when we do Terminator 2, but
we'll edit it out.
The amount of times he had to spin around the gun until his fingers were bleeding. So I say there's that craft.
I love that stuff. Yeah. I mean, that to me is actors going above and beyond, because the thing about seeing that scene is Jack's being introduced and he's playing with cards and you're like flipping it over and it comes up again and he turns the card over and it's like Joker. You know, I say Jack Palance. Jack. Who's even parodied in his own film by Jack Nicholson so well.
Well, I'm wondering, was Jack
That's got to be improv.
That's got to be ad-libbed, yeah.
Yeah.
And Bob, remember, you are my number one guy. Yes, sir.
So you've got, I love, there's so many quotes in this
Eckhart,
film.
There's Knox, or maybe this is just the way that we remember it, but I think the introduction of the supporting characters in this film is brilliant, because Batman arrives, and then there's Eckhart, and then there's Knox, and then there's Napier, and then there's Palance, and then there's Vicky Vale. It's done so economically. I don't know if comic book films don't seem to be made like that, because the big hang-up that we have is the shared universe. These character actors that we're talking about in Batman 1989 today have probably been introduced in some other film. Well, that's it. Or some other origin story.
Well, the fact is that I'm pretty sure Knox isn't in any of the Batman comics. Vicky Vale is a recurring character.
Well, yeah, she's in the comics. She's in Arkham.
Carl Grissom isn't. There's obviously Carmine Falcone. There's always been mobsters, but there are just new characters thrown into this. But they all...
Well, Jack Napier's a new character.
Well, yeah,
him being the origin of the Joker.
Well, that's it. The Joker never
has an alter. It doesn't have an alter ego.
A definitive alter ego. It's how they all work together to provide that exposition that you need, that background of.
But it's great.
How many sightings of the Bat have there been? You know,
what do you know about him? Is it true that the police force of? I mean, we know this film too well, but it's great. It's economic, as we say. The films you might notice that we pick, we like the ones that are structured well, that have economic disposition. Right. Exposition. That's exactly what I said. Shut up. Sorry, that's a hangover from the Goonies.
Yeah, you've got Eckhart, who's a really corrupt cop. And again, I think if we quickly touch on, we'll probably talk about it more later, but about the difference between this and the Chris Nolan films, I think the Nolan films deal with the whole corrupt police force a lot better. I don't really feel you get that. You
get the feeling that Eckhart's one bad cop.
And that's it.
And Commissioner Gordon's amazing. I mean, he's the type of guy that when a bell falls down a flight of stairs, he knows what to do. But more on that later.
More on that later. So you've got a little bit of Gotham's politics. So you've got the big festival coming up. You've got the mayor and Harvey Dent. They're trying to crack down on organised crime.
They've got a new DA, they've got a festival coming up, but there's sightings of the Bat, there's crime.
But there's internal politics with the gangsters as well, because Jack Napier's sleeping with Carl Grissom's mole, the lovely Jerry Hall, who's not married to a gangster in real life, she's just married to Rupert Murdoch.
Interpret that how you will.
How you will. I suppose then we launch into the first big action scene, which is the Axis chemical scene. So Jack Napier's set up, the police are there, Batman are there, Danny Elfman's amazing score's there.
Dun 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 dun. And remember every punch, every kick, everything about that scene.
I really love the way that whole scene's filmed, the way it's going around the different corridors. You've got a real sense of the vastness of the factory, It's just filmed really nicely. It feels claustrophobic. It feels, I don't know, for a real set. So this...
because I said to you, this place looks familiar. And you said...
And I said, fact fans, it's the same set as the ending of Aliens. So the processing plant on LV-426...
or whatever Ridley's calling it these days.
Whatever it's called. But when Ripley goes in to rescue Newt from the alien queen and is going through all those stairwells and corridors, all those industrial corridors, it's the same place. It's a power plant in West London, in Acton. But
there are no aliens there at the moment, and there's no Batman.
It's probably been turned into some, sort of penthouses or something. If it is still there.
It's a gourmet burger bar.
Actually no. What am I talking about? Batman blew it up. Of course it's going to be turned into some apartments. It's a great scene. It's great seeing Batman taking out all the criminals one by one through different methods.
The physical effects still look great to this day.
Yeah.
And they're not sped up. I mean, just to quickly jump back.
Or quickly edited.
Yeah, just to jump back to that first scene with the first crim that he takes down. The criminal runs away, and you see him, he pulls out the Batarang, and he throws it and gets it around the guy's leg, and then pulls the guy. Yeah. When I saw that at the cinema, I was like, whoa! Even watching it now, it looks believable. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty good shot. But he basically...
Well, he's Batman.
I mean, he's Batman. It's believable. I mean, it's you could believe that... I do think Nolan borrowed some of that. I don't think any of the gadgets you see in this film are completely impossible.
No, I was thinking that as well. They're quite grounded in this one, whereas obviously as the films go on, they get sillier and sillier until...
Let's not... We promised we weren't going to talk about Batman and Robin. We're not going to talk about it.
Pulls out the back credit card.
We're not going to talk about it, George. Okay. You went through... You paid a lot of money for treatment on this.
It's okay.
George Clooney was never in a Batman film. Say it again.
He was never in a Batman film.
Right, there you go.
Okay.
So,
sorry.
But you have that scene with Vicky Vale and him. He's like, how much do you weigh? And then she's too heavy. So, I mean, there was a bit of realism in the gadgets.
Yeah.
The fact that you did believe that he was building them himself. And I do think that Nolan borrowed some of that.
And there's some great visual design, the fact that everything's hidden behind his belt. Yeah. It's sort of they're all sliding into view. It's has he got loads of stuff on his back?
It comes up when you're talking about Grand Theft Auto. It's where do you keep all those weapons?
Yeah, well that's it. So you have, he's taking out all the different guys. Jack Napier running around, creating all these distractions, for diversions.
Arguably his own demise.
Yeah, and he's that close getting away. Batman lands. They have that first face-off, and
nice outfit.
And then Batman has to let him go. But Jack, being Jack, so ego-driven, wants to take another shot at him. Mm-hmm. And one thing leads to another, and he is knocked into a vat of...
Dropped. Batman can't hold on to him. Or does he drop him?
No, it's
a Nolan. It's a Christopher Nolan. Is it going to fall? Is it not going to fall?
Well, that's it. You're saying...
Fall, or did he...
Yeah.
Does Napier let go because he doesn't want to go to prison? Or does Batman let him go? Well, Batman doesn't let him go.
No, I think you see that hesitation in his face.
What, in Batman's face?
Yeah, you see that... No, I'm going to let... It's a very debatable point, and it's a lot of this whole point of Batman killing is a point that riles comic book fans even to this day, even with the Ben Affleck films, that Batman's whole motto is he doesn't kill.
His parents got killed by a gun, so that's why he doesn't use guns and why he doesn't kill.
Yeah, it's all about it's about justice.
Yeah, there you go, fanboys.
But with this, it's completely open to debate whether he just can't hold on to him. But I think there's that. This guy's better dead.
It's definitely...
He's going to keep coming back.
Why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because I think Burton's making a point here, because this is the first time we're talking about it. So in this first encounter, Batman is responsible, you could argue, for the Joker's death.
Yeah.
But this is not the first time. These two, there will be... we will find out that there is actually somebody created somebody. It keeps going back.
Yeah.
This is a theme that runs throughout the film.
Of creation.
Of creation and...
cause and effect?
Yeah, cause and effect, creation and termination between these two characters, which I think, we talked about the Jack Napier character not appearing. It's a brilliant idea. In terms of who came up with that, it's obviously Burton, Ham, the scriptwriter. The idea to make Napier the killer of Bruce's parents.
Well, no, it's a very good point, because Sam Ham argues, he says in this documentary, I just want to make two things clear. I never made Jack Napier the murderer of Bruce Wayne's parents. That was Tim's idea. And he goes, and I never let Vicky Vale into the Batcave.
But it's why when you get to the end of this film and you see that, it's so circular. It goes around and around.
Is the word I'm looking for cathartic?
Well, I said to you, Greek tragedy. The fact that Napier kills his parents creates Batman. Batman lets Napier die, creates Joker. Then Joker shoots Bruce Wayne when he's wearing the metal thing, and Bruce Wayne's not dead. Yeah. And then Batman actually kind of kills the Joker.
Well, he doesn't. He stops him from getting away.
Yeah, and then the building. It's actually bad masonry that kills Joker at the end. Yeah, but we're rushing.
Where there's blame.
Where there's blame, there's claim. Call the claim, guys.
You've got the whole dinner scene. I'm going to jump on now. You've got the dinner scene with Vicky Vale and Bruce Wayne. We haven't really talked about Bruce Wayne, but I think
Alfred.
It's interesting. It goes back to the reason why he was cast is the fact that in this, Bruce Wayne isn't the millionaire playboy. Well, he's a millionaire and he has success for
he's a brooding orphan.
But he's a recluse. He's a bit. I guess I've got to feel he's a bit like a Howard Hawks. He's an eccentric type. No one really knows who he is. You'd think Vicky Vale would know what he looked like, but it shows that he doesn't get out often. Obviously, he's missing all the, it shows that opening dinner party that he's missing at his spot. So he is a bit of a recluse.
He hasn't even eaten in this room before.
Yeah, and that's a great scene where he's like, they're at the end of the table and he's like, I don't think I've ever been in this room before. And it's that quirk, that sort of deadpan stuff that, Keaton does zany brilliantly. And Beetlejuice is a great film and he's amazing. Like for years, I didn't realize it was the same person.
Yeah.
Because he's so stoic in this. and dry, whereas Beetlejuice is physically all over the place. But yeah, he's got some great sort of Bruce Wayne scenes. The sort of the tender love story that seems happen very quickly.
All I can tell you is that after nearly 25 years, I still don't care about Vicky Vale's backstory involving her grandmother.
That's true.
I think that scene is ruined. There's a lovely scene where they leave that room that you're talking about. They go to the kitchen. They break it's like Alfred's not the staff, he's family, and Alfred's telling stories, and it's a lovely scene, and it's ruined by that terrible backstory. So yeah, and she screams a lot too much, but she's drop dead gorgeous. I forget, going back that Kim, is it? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say
in the documentary I watched, they call it Basinger.
It is Basinger, because a lot of people say Basinger, and I hate that pronunciation.
But she still looks amazing in the 25 years on in the documentary.
I was going to say she looked amazing in what was it?
Nice Guys.
Yeah, even recently, and in when she was made to look like some trailer park scum in 8 Mile, she's still, it's hard to make. So yeah, so she's a great damsel in distress, and talking about like the general themes of this film. She's not just a flimsy, they're talking about love. They're in love. That night just didn't mean nothing to me too, Bruce. And it's like, it's still the 80s, AIDS, condoms. Don't get together with someone unless you're in love. There was a sort of, at the end, she's in the limo, she's waiting for him. She's been in the Batcave, and they're in love. It's not what we know of Batman. It's...
But I love again, we're getting ahead, but she's like, but can't we just like love each other? And he goes, maybe, but he's out there and I've got work to do.
Who's out there, George? Who are you talking about?
The Joker. So yeah, you've got... Then Jack is released. Not Jack Napier, Jack Nicholson is released. And... he's such a good bad guy. I mean, yeah, people can argue he's hamming it up, he's devouring the scenery, but he's so good. There is endless one-liners. I haven't really gone through the script in detail, but it'll be interesting to see how much of it is just Nicholson going off on one and how much of it that is written.
Because there's something really eerie about that scene, because you've seen the Joker. I think because you've seen him the first time with his white face when he comes back to kill Gruesome, and he does that very funny scene, and they've kind of established the theme. He's like doing that, turning around, spinning around, killing Grissom, and it's playing that orchestral music in the background. And then there's this weird scene where he's assembled the mob, they're all around a table, and you hear him, but you don't see him, and they're just like, yeah, what's with that weird face? And it's just really eerie. And then it's all going well. And then there's this scene, which, watching this again, I've talked about in other episodes, my music, or whatever you call it, muscle memory on this scene was going into overdrive, because it's just like, you're getting a little bit hot under collar. All of the scene with Antoine, you're a sick bastard. What's that? Grease them now?
Grease them now. You are a vicious bastard, retaliate. I'm glad you're dead.
How much of that was improvised, I don't know, but it's an amazing villain. I would argue, I'm sorry, there's a lot of people out there that say that Heath Ledger's Joker's performance is the best villain ever. I don't think it is. I think this is the best Joker.
But you can't have one without the other. The reason Heath Ledger's performance is a reaction to Jack Nicholson's. You can't go all, because he was so out there, so in your face, so jokery, very much like the comics is. Heath Ledger had to go in the opposite direction, much like the whole realism. There had to be a reason. There had to be a real believable character. Whereas, yeah, the Joker is a comic book character in this film. He's larger than life, but he's brilliant. I mean, yeah, it's a
wish we could have had him in a sequel. I would just wish they could have got to the level that they do in the comics, where he's referring to Batman as bats. It's like it gets so personal, and it's this thing that obviously is hammered into your skull in The Dark Knight, which is one can't exist without the other.
And it was an unstoppable force against an immovable object.
Yeah, and yeah, I think. I love the Christopher Nolan films. I love Christopher Nolan as a director, but some of his films, I mean, Inception is one of my favorite films ever, but some of his films are hard to watch the second time. And those speeches from Ledger in the films about what made him the Joker, about getting cut up by his dad and all that, watching them 2-3 times, they seem a bit long. I could watch Jack till the sun goes down. You know, I mean, honestly, like, just, it's so much of the Joker that you know from the comics.
Well, that whole thing of him, like, looking at the paper, smearing the blood away, winged freak, terrorizes, wait till they get a load of me. And then he just starts going, whoop.
Yeah, I mean, that's nuts. I don't think it's like the camera still, like, just let the camera roll.
Just let Jack do his thing.
But I think that's also why they kind of told him Robin Williams is being considered, because we want an off-the-hook crazy Joker. And this reminds me, I'm going off on a massive tangent here and I do apologise, but it reminds me of Philip Seymour Hoffman in Along Came Polly, when they were... You mean
channeling Jack Black?
No, they said they wanted Jack Black, and Philip Seymour Hoffman said, I can give you Jack Black. And he basically did that role.
And he did.
And
he's the best thing in it.
And he is the best thing in it. Yeah. And I think it was the same thing. I think Jack Nicholson was like, oh, you want Robin Williams? I'll give you Robin Williams.
You want crazy?
Yeah, you want crazy?
I'll give you crazy.
Yeah, and he goes to town on it. And yes, he's remembered. Yes, in some ways, he's the star of this film. It's going to last a lot longer than people remember. And as I say, I watched it recently and I'm like, yeah, he's amazing, but he's so good. I think Keaton does a very good job next to him.
The film's biggest crime is the fact that they kill off the Joker.
I would love to see him, as I say, just
especially in this day and age. If it was done nowadays, obviously there's the whole shared universe thing and we've got to sort of keep it running. But yeah, at that time, they weren't sure how big a hit it was going to be. So he was always, from the first draft, he was always going to be killed off. But bizarrely, a bit of, there's so many what if Batman films that could have been made over the years.
So many comics, yeah.
But so many scripts that were developed and never got made since this film. And one of them was for Batman 5, so following the
film that shall not be named.
The film that should be not named, Batman Robin. But it was that chance to go back to doing something darker, and it was going to have Scarecrow, Harley Quinn, and there was going to be a scene in Batman 5 where Batman encounters the Scarecrow's fear toxin or fear gas, and he starts hallucinating, and it was going to be a chance to bring back Nicholson as a cameo, and he was going to be haunted by the Joker, and it was going to be Nicholson.
Batman, can somebody tell me what kind of a world we live in where a man dressed up as a bat gets all of my press?
Well, we've already talked about already, but the Prince video in the middle of the film with the museum takeover, which is a brilliant scene.
The henchmen are having a great time. What I can't get over is just the fact that, like, look, our boss is nuts. If we don't go along with this, he's going to kill us. And they're having an amazing time. They're like playing Prince, and they're just like tearing up artwork, trashing the place. And it's the same at the end on the float. They're like, look, we've just got to go nuts.
But it's got that same, again, there's so many iconic moments in this film, and that iconic shot of him smashing through Batman smashing through the skylight, his cape open. Where does he get those wonderful toys?
Yeah.
You've got a great but short-lived car chase with the amazing Batmobile.
And yeah, the one-trick pony, but it does work.
Yeah. You've got Vicky Vale screaming every 5 minutes. Then you've got the bit that I've just had to make a note, the sword guy that just pops up, the guy that flips over the fence. He's got samurai swords. He's going mental. Where did the Joker get that guy from?
And I don't think he even knows.
And it just smells of like studio executives going, we need more action in this, Tim. What have you got? We need to put an action scene. And it's
something with some martial arts, some kung fu.
You know what's popular? Martial arts. And it smacks of, oh yeah, just do the Indiana Jones thing. You've got the sword guy doing all the tricks, and then Batman just takes him out.
But I remembered it like that. But he does parry him once, and then he comes back.
There is a bit of sparks flying, literally. Yeah. But yeah, I think somebody's actually counted the amount of times that Vicky Vale screams, and I think it's something like in mid-20s.
It gets to the point where it sticks out.
Another great scene when you've got Keaton and Nicholson in the first time you've got them in the same room, but with Keaton as Bruce Wayne.
And they're shadowing each other.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that Keaton walks in and goes, oh yeah, nice apartment, lots of space. And he's trying to tell her he's Batman. And then the Joker shows up and the first thing he says, nice apartment, lots of space.
That whole scene, the way he's like, and he's got the music playing in the background.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, we're like this. And he's like laying down the romance so thick.
Yeah.
But everything it's, I don't know.
It's such a tense scene because obviously he's like, it starts off with, is Batman going to reveal his identity?
That's what you're expecting to happen. You're not expecting Joker to turn up.
And then, like, what's Batman going to do? What's Bruce Wayne going to do? He hasn't got his outfit.
No, but in today's world, Tony Stark or Batman opens up the briefcase and changes into Batman in the toilet and says, aha, I'm here. Whereas in this one, he goes and he takes...
This man, just going for a shit.
He comes back...
With your suitcase?
He comes back with his...
Sorry, with your briefcase.
In this film, he just goes into her room and he takes her makeup tray and
he does a fistful of dollars.
Yeah. Sorry, he does a what?
Well, it's what he does in Fistful of Dollars. He takes the metal plate. You've got so many bits in that one scene. You've got Keaton going nuts.
Which is brilliant.
It's completely out of Bruce Wayne. It's completely out of character for Bruce Wayne in any sort of... Bruce Wayne never lets his guard down in public, but... It's a great thing because it's such a tense scene.
I'm trying to work out what was the motivation. Because he's like, right, this is his game plan. It's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Napier. I'm going to go to Joker. Tell him that I know who he is. I'm going to pose myself as a massive threat. I'm then going to get threatening. And he's going to shoot me. Hopefully not on the head.
Why didn't you just shoot him in the face? Yeah, why didn't you shoot him in the face?
And then I'm going to disappear.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, let's not dwell too much on this. Theatrically, it works really well. You get some
But you've got Keaton going nuts. You've got one of the best lines out of the film.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
To just quickly jump back to my point about why I think Jack Nicholson is a better Joker than Heath Ledger, is that even reading the comics, Joker's hilarious. And all of the, in the more recent films, I'm sorry, but Joker it's funny, it's black comedy. Whereas I can't stop, I think everyone has to argue, it's a ride. Everything he says, his lines, his delivery, it's a performance piece.
Yeah, and you can just see that spark in his eyes, that there's that unpredictability that he could, that brilliant bit, we're jumping all over the place here, but in the parade, and it's something that we used to love, Bob, gun, and he just shoots his best henchman.
Well, that's it. That he's completely insane. Yeah, the fact that he for the whole of the film he's chasing Batman with Bob, and then at the last minute kills Bob. I think the message that they handle very well is that he's hilarious, but he's completely insane. He's psychopathic.
Well, we've gone past the love that Joker. You did talk about it earlier, but that whole TV ad, that sort of, for me, a key plot point in so many of the Joker stories in the comics. Like,
that he knows his chemistry.
And he's the way he poisons people. So I think one of the first Joker stories, he poisons somebody by poisoning their speech notes. So it's someone's at a dinner party giving, a key address and just starts manically laughing and turns into, the Joker grin and keels over dying. And that's a reoccurring plot theme of him poisoning people with the Joker gas or whatever it is, or the Joker toxin. But yeah, there's that whole scene with the 80s advert, and for some reason I just got shades of RoboCop, that 80s commercialism of buy stuff,
parodying adverts in their own films, but doing it very well.
But it's also shades of like typically Tim Burton, that sort of 50s style sort of
backdrops,
infomercial type thing,
set design.
Well, even you talk about that music that the Joker's playing in Vicky Vale's, that sort of seaside sort of organ sort of type music. But yeah, I love that whole, oh no, somebody's been using brand X.
But when they use mine, I get that grin again and again. I mean, I don't know. I think we talk about how much of this was improvised. Whether it was improvised or not is not important. The delivery is perfect.
Well, that's it. Like, there's so much I still quote to this day that you and I will quote to each other. I will quote to other people that know this film really well. Like when he's going through Vicky Vale's portfolio in the museum. Crap. Ooh, I like this.
I've done that with portfolios in real life. I may have annoyed a few people.
It's a Batman quote, guys.
What, you mean you haven't watched the 1989 Batman film recently?
It's a classic. The final bit now, so you've got the parade, another Prince music video, but again, it's a good song.
Yeah.
What really annoys me still is that, one, Batman can't hit the Joker with all those rockets, his laser
Somebody
targeting.
needs to realign his computer-assisted targeting.
He can't take out the Joker, and the Joker takes him out with one bullet.
It's got a really long barrel, though. That's as accurate as a sniper rifle.
Again, I think that's the Tim Burton influence. It's the
all of the gadgets,
it's the ridiculousness of it. It's the outrageousness of the fact that the Joker's got, it's the sight gag. The Joker's got this massive pistol down his
which is still hilarious to this day.
It is still hilarious. I was looking through the original script of one of the first drafts because I'd read in the documentary they talk about how they changed the ending, but in the parade bit, which makes a lot more sense on paper, one of the parade floats is actually a tank in disguise. So when the Batwing turns up, the Joker and all his goons jump in this tank, and the sort of the turret pops out, and he's trying to like strafe them in the plane, and obviously they take out the plane with...
Finds me ready.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Why he finds him ready, he's got a tank.
Yeah.
But obviously, probably for budget reasons, they scrap the whole tank bit, and they make it more of a comic set piece with the Joker and his massive barrel. The ending was changed apparently because originally... The face-off in the cathedral was just going to be between Batman and the Joker.
Commissioner Gordon and a bell.
Commissioner Gordon trying to push a bell for 20 minutes.
Okay, let's go.
No, originally, it was Batman taking on the Joker himself, but
we needed more action.
Apparently when they were in, Jack Nicholson and one of the producers, the production was in London. They went out one night and they went to see a show in the West End. They went and saw Phantom of the Opera, and they thought it would be a lot more operatic if Vicky Vale was...
Damsel in distress was inserted.
Yeah. They changed it to have her as a distraction of how Batman gets to the Joker, even though he's been badly wounded.
I think that works.
Yeah.
I think because if you remove her from it, it would be a little...
Yeah, there's no real stakes, I suppose, that,
Still done to this day. If you look in recent films like Iron Man 3 or whatever, you've got to have the... Yeah, it's happened many times that... a strong female character is inserted, but then 80s, 90s films, she's turned into a damsel in distress. But I think it works to good effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I say, we say it's biggest crime, you're killing off the Joker, but it's a great set piece. You've got the falling bell, and I've just got to launch into it. Commissioner Gordon is fucking useless in this film.
Why wasn't I told about this?
You go over there, and you go over there.
Be careful. We're cops. We're hunting the mob.
I mean, that is one thing that this film gets really wrong. And in all of the Tim Burton ones, the Joel Schumacher ones, Commissioner Gordon is completely useless.
In the comics, he's grizzled, muscly, and motivated.
He's determined. And that's what the Christopher Nolan films did brilliantly. You've got Gary Oldman, you've got him against the corrupt cops, him going out on a limb, and him being an integral character to the action.
While still being slightly uneasy about the idea of a vigilante.
Yeah. Whereas he's just a doddery old man, and it's more akin with the Commissioner from the 60s Batman. Oh, yes, hello, old chum. I think that's it in terms of the film from start to finish. So, shall we go on to recurring feature? Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
So I think you talked already briefly about who is considered for the role. For many other roles, but we're going to talk about one in particular.
Yeah, so there was many people in the running for the Joker, but Jack Nicholson was always the studio's top choice. However, for Vicky Vale, Sean Young was cast as Vicky Vale and went as far as filming key scenes, and they were doing some... Early on in production, there was a horse riding scene with Vicky Vale and Bruce Wayne, and she fell off a horse and broke a collarbone. And they literally had a week to find another actress to play Vicky Vale, and Kim Basinger was available.
So it's got nothing to do with the fact that Sean Young's completely batshit crazy?
Well, the production team may have startled the horse intentionally. But no, it's actually a little bit tragic, because she's on this retrospective documentary on the DVD, and she says, oh yeah, it would have, it still pains me to this day that I would have loved to have been part of such a successful film. It's sort of like, it would have the things it would have done for my career. And it was like, okay.
I'm thinking of getting a cat. They call her the cat lady.
Yeah, so yeah, Sean Young was supposed to be Vicky Vale, and to make it matters worse, they even cut out that whole horse riding scene anyway. But moving on, so we sort of talk about it. This film was such a cultural phenomenon. I mean, in terms of, we talked about the marketing engine behind it.
It was massive.
The merchandising, the bat symbol. That's the thing. The poster of just being that black and gold symbol was everywhere. That was so simple, so perfect. Everyone knew what it was. It was on everything.
You had a hoodie.
It wasn't a hoodie back then. It was just a sweatshirt.
Was it just a jumper?
A jumper back then. It also paved the way for the brilliant Batman animated series, which took a lot of those design aspects.
Similar sort of music, similar sort of time scale. Well, it took it back to like a futuristic 30s.
Yeah, it was sort of like the 1940s of tomorrow.
Yeah, 1940s with loads of really cool gadgets from the future.
Yeah, it was. I have a lot of love for the animated series, and most people would argue that the animated series gave us the best take on Batman, Kevin Conroy.
God, I love that guy.
And the best take on the Joker. And I think
this small time actor couldn't get any more work, decided to do some voice work. What's his name?
Mark Hamill.
Yeah, I've never heard of him.
AKA Luke Skywalker. So yeah, everyone says, oh yeah, Luke Skywalker never did anything, but he did a lot of voiceover stuff. And yeah, so Kevin Conroy's Batman, Mark Hamill is a Joker in the animated series, and they've gone on, they're still doing it now, and that probably segues nicely into the Arkham games,
which I'm going to talk about because I was late to the party with the PlayStation 3 because I'd been away traveling with a PS3 is not very advisable or possible. So I came late to the party. This game was already out, and I loved the first game, loved the second game, but this suddenly introduced so many characters. It was produced by DC and Warner Brothers, and they decided to bring a lot more to the comic book to the game. So
it was written by Paul Dini, who was the main writer on the animated series.
Yeah, the story was amazing, and the character, and they kept Mark Hamill doing the voice of Joker in the game. And there's something about the character. The character in these games it's a mix of the Heath Ledger and the Jack Nicholson, but it's the comic brought alive. And not to fast forward, but I mean, obviously they've made a trilogy of these games. They've been very successful. They're a great mixture of stealth and action. And in the most recent game on the PS4, you get to drive the Batmobile, but it's not really used as well as it could be because we're all used to amazing driving physics in games like GTA. When it's done in another game like this, it's a bit disappointing. But without any spoilers, the Joker has been prominent in all of these games, and every single time he steals the show. Just like Jack steals the show, and just like Heath Ledger steals the show, that it's the Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, it's the Blofeld and James Bond.
The yin and the yang.
The yin and the yang, it's like you can't make
a snake to my mongoose.
Yeah, you can't make a good Batman story, and I say story because I think that applies to books, to comics, to films, to computer games, without involving the Joker somehow. And the best use of the Joker in the Arkham series is actually after the Joker's been killed, which is involving Scarecrow,
Fear Toxin.
and when he turns up it's all in Batman's head, but Brilliant. It's for your enjoyment, and it's one of the best things in it. Nobody else can see him, but it's like it's his alter ego. Like to talk about, Animal House, like the little devil and angel on your shoulder. Throughout the game, you've got Joker being your alter ego, and it's something that we've talked about it that resonates. It's a very complicated relationship between the two of them, that Joker is, as Michael Caine says, wants to watch the world burn, and Batman wants eternal justice. And I can't think of another mythology that deals with justice and evil in such
chaos and order.
Chaos and order in such a well-organized way, in such a way that we can grasp that he doesn't have special powers. It doesn't get silly and he just like pulls lightning from the clouds. This is a millionaire with gadgets against a psychopath who will do anything
and will go to any length.
And it's a very good reflection on what is possible. In what could be possible if you're writing a story about good versus evil.
We haven't really talked about the Amiga game. I mean, you've been telling us about how brilliant
3D graphics.
You've been telling us about how brilliant all the Arkham games are with your PS4, your PS3. But, I remember we spent a lot of time playing on the classic Amiga version, which was a platform game. I remember you jumping around, you had a grappling hook, you were throwing golden coins at people, I think it looked like.
George, we never got past the Axis Chemical level.
Oh, okay, maybe
we always got to the end of it, and then at the end, you had to fire your grappling hook, and we can never do that last bit. So I think we spent about 4 months in Axis Chemicals, and then I think we had to get one of my friends over who was a little bit older, and he could do the grappling hook bit, and then after that, you could get in the Batmobile.
Okay.
And then you could fire the thing and go around a lamppost.
So back in the days of the 90s where there was a tie-in Amiga game, I think it was a company called Ocean.
They made a lot of games. They did...
Terminator 2 was one of them. Predator?
I'm going to throw it out there. I'm not sure it was Predator, but I have a feeling that they were also part of the Atari sensation of California Games.
Okay.
Which was a big thing.
But there was also, so we had that on the Amiga, and I remember I had, of the 2 games that we had on our Mega CD.
Mega CD 2, George. We didn't get the first one.
Sorry.
We got the Sega Mega CD 2.
Because we had the Mega Drive 2.
Yeah, the only 2 games we had were Echo the Dolphin and Batman Returns.
And some manga driving game. I can't remember what that was called anyway.
I don't remember.
But yes, the Batman Returns on Mega CD wasn't that much better. Very much a platform going level by level.
Fire Batarang, go to next level.
Yeah, take out lots of goons.
But it's funny how we remember it is that we were trying to live as much of Batman as we could, and we were young, we were kids.
Yeah, well, because we didn't have you didn't have all that accessibility of YouTube and all that. That was the way you could consume. Like, it was a way, like I talked about, the making of book, the soundtrack. That was how you relived films when you were younger.
I did find one of your Bruce Wayne
action figures.
I wasn't going to say dolls.
No, sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again.
I didn't say dolls. I found your Bruce Wayne action figure, and I was like, look, I think Michael Keaton would be really happy.
You mean is that the one?
So buff.
Is that the one where he's wearing a roll neck?
He's wearing a purple roll neck, and he's ridiculously well built.
I failed to mention some of Michael Keaton's or Bruce Wayne's fashion choices in this film. At one point, he's wearing the roll neck or the turtleneck, as the Americans call them. But at one point, he's wearing a chunky knit, a shirt, and a cravat as well.
George, that just sounds to me like a Zara model. You know, when you go to Zara and the guy in the model's wearing like 7 layers. He's wearing a t-shirt, then a shirt, then a waistcoat, then a gilet, and then a jacket. And you're like, dude, where are you? And why are they all open?
Well, it's
if you're wearing that many layers of clothing, if you've logged in for the Zara podcast.
Maybe you get that in Paris, Johnny Foreigner, but you don't get that in the metro city.
Well, you get even just a shirt. Anyway, we digress. These games have been just as encapsulating as the, we're talking about the animated series, we're talking about Kevin Conroy, we're talking about Mark Hamill. It can't go without us mentioning the Dark Knight, where you're going to tell me the actor's name, but RoboCop
Oh, Peter Weller.
Peter Weller taking on the role of this is when Batman is older, more frail, and fights Superman, which is one of the best animated films I've watched.
So it's the comic. It's based on the comic book The Dark Knight Returns, which influenced Tim Burton's Batman because it came out in I think 1986, one of the greatest graphic novels of all time, and it's all about an aged Batman coming back into the frame and facing all his villains, and it ends with him facing off against Superman. Again, they took a lot of that for the recent Batman vs Superman. DC have done some really good animated adaptations recently, some direct to DVD or whatever you want to call it. They've done a 2-part adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns with none other than RoboCop's Peter Weller.
And he's got a great voice.
He's got such a deep voice.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me. But as
you say, it's if you're a big Batman fan, seek it out because it pisses on the recent Batman versus Superman.
10 times better than anything that was in Batman versus Superman. They get it completely right. It's believable, and they can go to places with the animation.
And it's a great study of the Batman character. And I think that's what leads me into talking about Batman's he's a key figure of American mythology. And the great thing about Batman is that he's a character that can change with the times and demands of culture at the time. So
millionaire playboy takes on evil.
No, but if you think about the 60s, you had camp, colourful, you have the dark broodingness, the gothic fairy tale of the Tim Burton films. You have the gritty realism of Christopher Nolan, and then it seems with the current reiteration with the Zack Snyder,
Let's copy Marvel.
It's kind of somewhere between the two. But the fact is, with Batman, you can do that, whereas you can't do that with other superheroes. You look at when they tried to make Superman dark.
Fail.
In Man of Steel. They tried to make Fantastic Four dark and gritty.
Fail.
And whereas Batman is a malleable character. And
it also, just to chip in there, but it also actually shines a light on how restricted Spider-Man is. But because you've seen that in the recent film, that they can take him out of New York briefly, but he's always got to be a teenager. He's always got to be in New York. There's always got to be him struggling with being young and being a hero. They're actually really constrained.
Yeah.
But Batman isn't.
That's true. There's a lot of room for movement in Batman. Without this film, it was so influential on the comic book genre as a whole. But you can't, and everyone will talk about how superior the Nolan films are, but they wouldn't be here. Like Batman and the Joker, they can't exist without each other.
Well, even Nolan's come out and said that they inspired him.
Yeah, he said, it's Tim Burton's. They're brilliant. It wasn't an origin story, and that's what inspired him to take on Batman Begins, because that origin story of Batman hadn't been told. Tim Burton's, he said, was very idiosyncratic, gothic kind of masterpiece, and I think that sums it up perfectly. The strength of this film against many other of its ilk, Donner's Superman, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Iron Man, they've all got origin stories, whereas this one doesn't. And I think that's what's an interesting twist on it. It just gets straight into it.
So I think we've kind of answered the question of, does it still hold up today? Is this a generational thing? George and I, both in our 30s, we were young when we watched this, we were impressionable. I don't think this would look too dated if you were to go back to it. I think it still holds up, but are we biased? I think we'd have to admit that we're slightly biased.
Oh no, I'm massively biased. There's a lot to enjoy in this film, whether you're a diehard comic book fan or just a casual fan. We're inundated with comic book films at the moment, but
they're all glossy and shiny and part of a shared universe. This is a standalone gothic film,
and I think a lot of the credit, all the credit, has to go to Tim Burton. It's his version, and Tim Burton's done some fantastic films. He hasn't done that many great films recently.
What have you done for me lately?
What have you done for me lately, Tim? But he's very stylized. He very much has his own thing of Danny Elfman, Johnny Depp.
What I said about the
Helena Bonham Carter.
No, it's what I said at the beginning about the artwork. I love that. I mean, maybe that's because this was just maybe some time before CGI had made its mark, but yes, you can see its artwork. but it looks great. It kind of makes it feel more thespian.
Yeah.
It looks like a theatre backdrop. You know, you can see what it is, but you don't care. Whereas now you're like, oh, that's Gotham, but you know it's CGI, and it loses some of its effect.
Kevin Smith, the film director, he did a review of each of the Batman films. Him and his friend went back and they basically sort of record alternative commentaries. And the one thing they take the piss out of in this film is the fact that there's Gotham City because they've created all these sets on a studio. It seems like there's only 10 people living in Gotham City. In all the sort of like crowd scenes, there's about 20 people max. Whereas with obviously the Nolan films, they filmed in real cities, so it feels more...
Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago. But yeah, I suppose it's I'll quickly touch on Batman Returns, the fact that because of the success of Batman...
Gotta make a sequel.
But Tim Burton, he put his foot down and said, if we're going to do a sequel, we're going to do it my way. So that's why it goes...
Really Tim Burton.
Really Tim Burton, really dark, really away from the comic. Again, I have a lot of love for that film.
Are we going to cover that? It's got one of our favourite actors of all time in it. Bruce Wayne.
Why are you dressed as Batman?
My son, Chip.
Santa Claus. Afraid not. Christopher Walken. We might do a quick thing on Batman Returns, maybe, I don't know, as part of a Christmas special or something.
I think we just did it.
Yeah, done. The less said about penguins with rockets on their backs, the better.
I'm not sure if we forgot anything. I have a horrible feeling that we might have sounded a bit harsh on the Nolan films, which we thoroughly enjoyed and loved, don't we?
Yes, I mean, I like to think of it as we're too defensive of Tim Burton's Batman, but yeah, we both have a lot of love for Christopher Nolan films. Inception's one of my favourite films. I love The Dark Knight. I think it is a masterpiece. However, it's one thing it's not is fun, whereas this film is, as we've talked about, is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I think it was me who was coming off and talking about Heath Ledger, but it was just in comparison to Jack Nicholson. I think they're both amazing performances, and you're probably going to have a preference. In mine is the Nicholson one. I'm not taking anything away from Heath Ledger's. So I think that's pretty much. Oh no, what didn't we have time for, George?
Well, we didn't talk about the Joker from the 1960s Batman covering up his mustache with makeup, but that's not that important. No, we didn't actually. We ran out of time, and we didn't talk about the most recent Batman cinematic release, which was the Lego Batman film.
Great film, loads of jokes, and am I right in thinking it references just about every single incarnation of Batman that's been on screen?
Oh yeah, so pretty much all the Batmen that we've been talking about. So the Adam West Batman films, all of the 80s and 90s films. So and it goes right up until last year's Batman vs Superman. There's a lot of in-jokes. It's a lot of fun. There's even,
so many jokes.
And it pokes a lot of fun at films that aren't even Batman-related. So it's not just for Bat fans. If you enjoyed the first Lego movie, it has that same sort of quirky humour. The only thing, and I think we're sort of in agreement on this, is that the Will Arnett, who is an amazing comic talent who plays Lego Batman, his gruff sort of Christian Bale Batman-style voice can get a bit grating after an hour and a half. But still...
There's no Bruce Wayne version of him, is there?
No, it's just constant for an hour and a half, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm not sure if I don't know if it could stand like a sequel. I think he's good in small doses, like he is in the Lego film.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much it. And wasn't there something in the news this week? Actually?
Yes. So since shortly after we recorded our episode, there's been some big Joker news in Hollywood. So there's the ever-growing DC cinematic universe that has obviously Batman vs Superman, Wonder Woman, And whilst a Batman trilogy has been discussed with Ben Affleck, obviously the Jared Leto Joker that popped up in Suicide Squad was really poorly received. And just last week, they've announced a Joker Origins film produced by none other than Martin Scorsese, which I think has surprised a lot of people because he's never done anything comic booky before, apart from Hugo, which is which is a nice kids film. But interestingly, apart from that, it's saying that Jared Leto will not be appearing as a Joker. They are looking for a new Joker, so it is not going to be connected with the bigger DC universe, which has got everyone confused, but also a little bit excited, because that could mean that DC are starting to, well, not hedge their bets, but go off the beaten track a bit and do standalone stories as well as this ever-growing universe.
Yeah, why not? I mean, they own the rights. If they got Scorsese interested, he wants to make a Joker film, they're like, well, why should we? Maybe they have got something in production with Jared Leto. Why stop going down there? Why not have both? It's all raising awareness of their comic brand. So yeah, why not?
Well, that's it. If you think there's countless Joker stories, Joker origin stories, so there's no real definitive take, and that's what Dark Knight did so well. It made the Joker's origin quite ambiguous. My only worry about this film, and as we talked about in the episode, is that Joker only really works if you've got Batman in the picture. So if you're doing a Joker Origins picture, where does that leave Batman?
Okay, well, we really are, I think, pushing the limits of how long we could go. Sorry we've chatted for so long. It is a film that's close to our hearts, and obviously we've tried to cover everything to do with Batman that's occurred over the years to try and explain, why it's still relevant today, why it's going to continue being relevant for the future. And George, you've written a review for our readers, the guys who follow our blog. Isn't that right?
Yes, I have tried to write a very balanced review, despite being a huge Bat fan. That has, some interesting trivia tidbits. But there's the reviews there. There's reviews of all the other podcast films coverage that we've done. And there'll also be some, silly little YouTube videos and things like that we'll put on there. So, check out RetroRamble.blog.
Excellent. So thanks for listening. Next month, we're going to be back with the action sci-fi sequel to James Cameron's Terminator 2, which has just come out on 3D in the cinema. So looking forward to that, George?
Very much so. It's one of my favourite films of all time. And I think it's our first James Cameron film and first sequel for Retro Ramble. So I think, again, it has the potential to be another long episode, because I'm sure we've both got a lot to say about it.
But I don't think it'll be the first time that anyone has to hear the occasional Arnie impression. So until then, I've been Charlie McGee.
I'm Batman.
And not again, George. Come on. Didn't say you could put the mask on. You said you weren't going to wear it.
Swear to me.
Okay, he's gone full Christian Bale. George, just take off the mask. No one can see it.
It would be extremely painful for you.
It's not even Batman. That's Bane. Okay, George, we really need to talk about this.
No, I'm sorry. I'll get better.